In this video, we're going to look at a two-column proof, and we're going to be following the method talked about in the previous video. So let's take a look at what we have here. We have some information here that's broken into two sections. So we have the given information, and we have what we want to prove. Okay, so as was talked about in the last video, the stuff that we want to prove, that's going to be the very last step in our proof, always. All right, and then we're going to use the given information here, the stuff that they tell us is true, and our picture to help us prove that these two triangles are congruent. So we've been working on our triangle congruency conjectures for a bunch of days now, and now we're going to actually apply those to proving that two triangles are congruent. So we know from our triangle congruency conjectures that we need three pieces of information to prove that they're congruent. So just a quick review, we've got side, side, side. That's one of our methods. Side, angle, side, angle, side, angle, 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 side. And we also had hypotenuse, leg, if it was right triangles. So these are the 5 methods that we're going to look at to figure out if we can prove these triangles congruent. And we'll mark our picture as we go so we can figure out which one we have here. So we can see in our given information we know that AC is congruent to BC, and it's marked here, but if it wasn't marked, I would go ahead and mark it. It's important that you're marking your diagram so you have a visual of what pieces of information you have congruent. And we also know that M is the midpoint of AB. So one of our first steps is always to list the information that's given to you in the problem. So if you come down here, we have our statements and we have our reasons. I usually just call it reasons instead of reasoning, but either one is fine. And notice we have AC is congruent to BC. That's my first statement. And the reason that I can write this in the statements column is because it is given to me in the problem. So we simply write given. And then our next statement is M is the midpoint of segment AB. And again, we always have to provide a reason. The reason for that is that it is given to us in the problem. So we simply write given. So now we have to use the given information to draw some conclusions, because right now we only have one pair of sides congruent and we need 2 more pieces of information. And we've got some stuff filled out here. Eventually you're going to do this all on your own. But we see here we have definition of midpoint. So if I know that M is the midpoint, the conclusion that I can make from that, we know that a midpoint divides a segment into 2 congruent segments. So here's AB on the bottom. If M is the midpoint, I know that this piece and this piece are congruent. So I can fill in here that segment AM is congruent to segment BM. And notice the corresponding order. Since A matches with B on the other triangle, since I put A first, I also put B first. And then the reason I can put that is because the definition of a midpoint. I know M is a midpoint, therefore these 2 segments are congruent because of the definition of midpoint. And once you do a bunch of these, you'll start getting the hang of all the different reasons. Alright, so far we have 2 pair of sides. So we're not going to use this method because that only has 1 pair of sides. We're not going to use this one, and we're not going to use that one because that's for right triangles. And even though these look like they're right triangles, we can't assume it. Alright, so let's take a look at our next step here. We've got CM congruent to CM. Alright, so that's this side down the middle. Again, my personal tick mark for this is a little box, but you can use whatever tick mark you want. Okay, I just look at that and say, oh, that's a reflexive side. It's part of both triangles, so we can use it as a side for both triangles, CM congruent to CM. And the reason we can say that is simply by the reflexive property. Remember, the reflexive property just says that a segment or an angle is congruent to itself. So now we can look at our picture and I can say I have, 3 pair of sides congruent. That's enough to use this method So we should have enough. So I've got a pair of sides from here. Sometimes I like to mark them. And I have a pair of sides from here. And I have my third pair of sides from here. That's enough information now to say that triangle ACM is congruent to triangle BCM. And the reason I can say that is by our side triangle congruency. And then the last thing we have to do, we're going to look back in our proof and we're going to find 3 congruency statements that give us the 3 sides. So up here, that's a congruency statement. So that's step 1. Our next congruency statement that gave us a pair of sides is step 3. So step 3. And then our last congruency statement was in step 4. So I'm going to put a 4 here. This just lists the 3 steps where I had my 3 pair of sides. And we've done our first 2-column proof, proving 2 triangles are congruent. So nice work with that. Again, if you have any questions, make sure that you ask, and we will see you in the next video.